Hi, I'm Machiavelli, and I'd still wreck Thorin at Quake, and I'm welcoming you to Thorin's YouTube channel.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Reflections, and my guest for this one is going to be RAISY, who is obviously a decorated Quake Champions player. Now, the interesting thing in your career, RAISY, is you are actually quite rare in the sense that almost everyone else in Quake Champions basically is someone who basically played Quake their whole life or was in Quake Live or Quake 3 or whatever, depending on their age. But in your case, I've seen in old interviews that you've said that you did play like Quake 3 Arena with like bots at home. But if people don't know, you actually come from my world. You come from Counter-Strike, actually. You were playing like in the Counter-Strike scene. If people don't know, that's obviously quite a popular game in your region. Like, when I went and looked, you aren't, it's, when people say that, when I say you come from my world, it's not like you were at the LANs, I was at like IEMs and stuff. You were obviously playing like Go for CSGO Cups and ESL Cups. When you say that, you often say you were like a semi-pro. How much were you actually trying to be like a top player in Counter-Strike? Was it just a game for fun? Were you thinking there was a path to become a pro?
Well, you're partially right and also wrong at the same time, because like you said, in my previous interviews, I have told people that I was very familiar with Quake 3 because as a little kid, I played it a lot against bots. We didn't have internet back then. And I played it like on and off for a few years for fun on a hobby level. Of course, I wasn't like any good at it. I was just a little kid, but I was having fun and I was familiar with it because I played so much of it that the arena FPS style became something that was like comfortable for me to navigate around in. Both when it comes to like spawn mechanics, how to move around, how the weapons work, how to collect items and stack up with armor and health and all that. So I was very familiar with it. And I actually, when I was 10 years old in 2005, I believe, around that time, I went to a Hungarian, well, I wouldn't necessarily call it a tournament. It was just like a LAN meetup organized by a popular gaming newspaper, basically, where there was a part where people competed for Quake 3. And I participated. I didn't do that well, but that was my first real sense of what it's like to play it on a serious level.
Right.
And I enjoyed it throughout. It was a lot of fun. It was like, I think, 2 days long. So, you know, you got the feeling of sleeping as well at the venue, basically. My dad brought me there and we did it together. It was like a together activity with my dad. And it was like something that is really dear to me to this day. Very good memory. So that was my introduction to Quake 3, basically. But then, like you said, I started playing CS. And after like a year or two, I started competing in it. Back then, I was playing Source. It was the year 2010, when I was around 15, 16. That was the year when I first went to a LAN event in Hungary for CS. And before that, I was kind of known for being fishy online, as I was young and I have not proven myself before that I can play well, so I'm not cheating. I'm of course talking about the Hungarian scene, not like worldwide,
Sure.
but just the like my group of people that I was playing with and against, and all those like Hungarian top tier teams at the time that I wanted to become a part of. I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to start competing and be one of the best and all that. And so in 2010 was the year that I played my first CS LAN, and I managed to play well on an individual level. And that started my CS career, so to say. And then I was invited into a good, well, I should say better team. And we started going on events and started winning all the Hungarian tournaments and all that. We were like all young and upcoming players with a lot of motivation, a lot of time on our hands.
Sure.
So we put a lot of time and effort into it, and we tried our best, and we actually became quite good considering the circumstances. Of course, I come from Hungary, and I don't even think there was like a very famous Hungarian team
at this time
ever.
there wasn't. No.
Yeah. but we became quite good, and we started going international as well. I would say we were on semi-professional level, a little bit behind like the top tier pro level, but like quite close to it. We went to like Gamers Checked, if you know what that was, in Croatia, and we won that one for Source in 2010 and also in 2011. And then we also went to, in Sweden, there was the 30p LAN, if you know what that is.
It's like a smaller LAN if people don't know, where there's like mixed teams go and stuff, right?
Kind of, but at the time it was quite big because it was like towards the end of Source.
Right.
And by then, either you were competing on a top tier level, or you were like nowhere close to it. So all the teams that were competing at the time and were like EU top 10, basically, all participated at that event, and we became. I don't know what our placement was, but we had some good results. For example, we knocked out Reason Gaming, which at the time was quite a big thing, and we were very proud of it. And officially, there was the rankings for CS Source, and we were 11th in EU. So we were not like mention worthy, but almost. You know?
Right.
Yeah, so we played a lot at the time, and then eventually we migrated over to Global Offensive, when it came out, and we also competed in that for a few years. And I was playing against, at the time, top tier teams. I remember practicing day after day against Flipside, which at the time had Simple as one of their players.
Okay.
And we played against many other top tier teams as well. And we played on LANs. We qualified for, what was the name of that LAN? Oh, I can't remember.
What country was it in?
I think it was, first we had to go Bulgaria to qualify to an event that was, I think, in Slovenia, maybe.
Oh, okay.
It's been a while. I can't remember. My memory is not that good to begin with. Like these details, I can't remember. But like top tier teams were there, like Kingwin, I think at the time they were called, with like Scream. There was that like mixed team with Nico, Scream. I don't remember who else. But Simple was there with his team as well. There was a top tier Bulgarian team with Bubble.
Yeah. The guys people know from back in the day, sure. Yeah. Punisher and all those guys, Dreamer and all like that.
Yeah, I think maybe Spy Leader was also in that team.
That's the group of people that everyone will know from CS, yeah.
Yeah, so at the time we were like competing against those players, and every now and then we had good results. Sometimes like not very often, but like every now and then we beat teams that no one would expect us to beat, and that felt really good, and it made us feel like we just need one more step to break into the pro scene.
Right.
But it never really happened, unfortunately for us, even though we tried for years and years with all kinds of lineups. We tried people like we felt like would be more suitable for this, like with mentality and skill set wise, because sometimes it was very hard to find the right teammates. I am not a fan of swapping members after every match just because we lost, so it must be his fault and we have to swap him out for someone else. I don't follow that mentality.
Right.
But unfortunately, in this sport, very frequently, even if you try your best, you have to realize that some people are not cut out for it.
Sure.
No matter how much time and energy you put into it, either they don't have the right mindset and they break mentally either during a match or after, and then you just can't fix the situation anymore, or they just don't have like the mechanics or the skill set to realize what to do in what situation. They make the wrong choices all the time, and that costs you to lose a round or die or even a match or stuff like that. And when it comes to us wanting to become pro, we just couldn't afford those mistakes. So we needed the best, and we went through quite a few lineups. but we could never make it really work. And I'm not saying that it's like the others' fault, because I was always a part of what I was trying in, and I probably could have done better certain things, but back then my mindset was also different. I was young and I was inexperienced, and I just didn't know better. But I tried, but sometimes I just felt outclassed in many ways. It's hard to describe. You play the game and you're quite good, and when you start competing against top tier teams, and you do really well, but you're just slightly behind, that makes all the difference. Yeah, so we tried, and it didn't really work out. I also, there was one event, a minor qualifier, I believe. Where was it? It was, I think, in Germany. What was the name of that place? One sec.
Was it maybe like the Ace of Predator Masters or something? That one that was in like Krefeld, where that StarCraft guy used to have it in his house, if you know what I mean. It was like all in the guy's house or his studio. Is that maybe
not
it?
that one? No. It was a minor qualifier in Germany, but I forgot the name. It's such a, I should know it. I really should, but all of a sudden it's just, I can't remember.
It's all good. It's all good.
Anyway, we played there as well, and I believe we lost. Maybe it was LGB that we lost against. It might have been a different event, but
okay.
I think we lost against LGB, and I think if we had one more match, we would have gone through the qualifier at that event to play at the majors. I think something like that. I might be wrong about certain details. It's been a while, but yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that very often we came very close to breaking into pro level, but we could just never manage it.
I think it was, you were trying to qualify for ESL1 Cologne, yeah, and it was you lost to LGB. I looked it up now on the wiki. Yeah,
yes.
Okay, that'll be it then.
That's the one.
But if you'd have won this match, you would have made it to the LAN, and obviously this was a major. If people don't know, yes, you would have been at a major, right?
Yeah, I
so you were
think
this
so,
close, right?
Either one more match or two more matches.
Right.
I'm not exactly sure, but yes, yeah, that was the one that I'm trying to remember.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, we tried for many years and we were close many times, but we just couldn't make it. And that was really heartbreaking every single time, because we really, really wanted to make it happen. And we were so close so often, but just not quite there, you know?
Right.
And all of a sudden it felt like as if we had done nothing at all for years.
Right.
And so it was always very, very difficult to stand back up from that and continue.
Right. Yeah, if people don't understand, the part I was wrong about was he didn't obviously only play Go for CSGO tournaments. That's just all that you'll find if you look at like the esports earnings. Obviously, in this case, he was trying to qualify to the big lands, or he was going to the smaller lands. Right. The question I have is an obvious one, RAISY. Even though I understand that like skill in games doesn't directly translate to other games. Like, for example, people might not know this, but even though to Quake players, Counter-Strike was always like a noob game, I can tell you, mate, a long, long time ago, a lot of the best Quake players all tried Counter-Strike when it became the big esports game, and most of them were not good, I can tell you, because some of them only had aim, or they had like a weird type of aim, or they didn't understand concepts like trading or how you use the utility. You know, like none of these factors were in Quake at the time. So the question I would have is this: if I watch your skills in Quake Champions, I mean, especially your aim, your hit scan aim is really fucking good. Like, essentially, people don't know, hit scan aim is just what Counter-Strike is. It's that plus like the mental side of the game. Was it just because you were younger? Like, if I put you back now, the skills you have today, couldn't you be a really good CS player? If you played CS2 today and you tried to go pro, seems like you should be pretty good, right?
I feel like I would do better than nowadays. Yes, not necessarily because of my experience, but also if I had my experience and my young, like how to say, energy. I guess that's the simplest way to put it. If I could combine these two things, I would become, I think, better, and just better enough to maybe even become pro, you know. Because back then I think I lacked experience and just like a better understanding of certain aspects of the game, like you said, like how to trade frags and how to lurk, how to support the team with grenades and all that. Like, these little details, they matter so much, and if you are like really good at all of them on a base level, then all of a sudden you're a great player. If you're just good at one or two things, then yeah, you can have your highlights every now and then, but overall, you're not gonna be a pro level player. You have to be good at every aspect of those things, which is the hard part. Because yes, as a Quake player, playing and watching CS just feels slow. I can't put it any better. I'm not gonna say it's boring, because it's not. And I don't even think I'm biased. I have, history in both games.
Sure.
I wouldn't say I'm biased. I just, if you're used to constant action, following Quake, which is about constant action basically, then watching CS just feels slow. Because in CS, many times you just have to hold an angle for like a minute straight and nothing happens. And then all of a sudden, half a second pass after you holding the angle for a whole minute, and 5 people appear on your screen, and you have to react to that. So it's just a different kind of environment. It's definitely not boring. And since CS2 has been released, I have been playing it actively, actually. I'll tell you later why. And it was just weird to come back, but it's just as much fun to compete and try your best and do well in CS after playing Quake as well. I don't even know if I answered your question.
It was basically about how you would do if you went back to CS. I think you did. What I would ask is this. When you said earlier you did play like some Quake 3, if one thing to play against bots at home, did you ever watch any of the actual like pro matches? Did you ever watch like a Rapha game or a Cooler game or a Cypher game back in the day when you were just younger? Did you ever see any of the pro stuff?
I was watching Quake Live. Is when I started following the Quake scene.
Right.
And I was a huge fan of watching these professional level matches. I was familiar with the pro scene, as in I didn't know them, but I was familiar with names, and I was following their matches and how they played. I had a favorite as well, but at the time I was still competing in CS, but I was playing Quake Live when it came out. First it came out in a browser form, but later it had a launcher, a program called QL Prism, I think. Way before it came out on Steam. You had to like separately download the program and then play through that, which was a way better alternative to the browser, because the browser was very laggy at times. So yeah, at the time I was competing in CS Source, but I was also playing Quake Live on a hobby level, and I was following the professional level of Quake Live, but I was nowhere near that good. And I couldn't even think of becoming that good. Like, to me, it just felt impossible. Timing and being so good with movement and reading the map and reading your opponent, knowing all the spawns, weapon managing, ammo managing, everything else that comes with top level Quake. It just felt so far from me, I actually remember having dreams. It sounds a little bit weird or cringy maybe, but like I had dreams like, oh, I'm playing as this pro player in my dream and I'm actually doing well. Oh wow, that feels so great. Like it, and then you wake up and oh right, makes sense. Just a dream.
Does it make it though when you came to the actual like Quake Champions scene? Obviously the joke is all the top players pretty much except for you and some of the people in your team actually in your group. There are all these guys from Quake 3. Literally those players. Cooler, Quake, Cypher, Kilser, it's all Sparta, everyone that you were watching at that time. It's basically who you've competed against in Quake Champions. Has that been kind of strange? Is it surreal to actually play those guys? And like the sort of dream, you're really there on the stage, you're playing this guy in a final.
It was very surreal. For me, it started with Quake Champions. I never competed in Quake Live, and Quake Champions came out in 2017. At the time, I was playing Global Offensive, and I was still trying to become pro at it. It just wouldn't happen. I just didn't wanna, unfortunately. And I decided when Quake Champions came out, and I started playing in it. I started competing in like smaller online tournaments just for the fun of it. And I noticed that I started doing really well in those tournaments. And eventually they announced the World Championships for Quake Champions. And I decided that I'm going to try myself and participate in the qualifiers. And so I made a decision that in case I manage to qualify, I'll leave CS behind, and I'll try to get pro in Quake and make a career in there. And there were, I think, like 3 or maybe 4 qualifiers for the World Cup, and I participated in all of them, but I lost in the first one. I tried myself in the second one. I lost there as well. I couldn't make it through. And I tried the third one. Didn't happen. And then I tried myself in the fourth one, the last qualifier. Maybe it wasn't the fourth one, but the last qualifier for it. And I had to play against Tox. And anyone who is familiar with Quake at all in any way knows who Tox is.
Yes.
And I had to beat him in order to qualify. And I was like, again, this close. And then I have this huge monster in front of me that is just, it seems impossible.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, I beat him very one-sidedly. So unexpected. And I was just speechless. And the match was over, and I'm just sitting in my chair and like, I just qualified for the World Championships. What? I couldn't believe it. And so, I managed to qualify. And so I decided to leave CS behind. And that's when my Quake career started in 2017. And I played the World Championships in Dallas. I made through the groups. And then in the bracket, which was unfortunately a single elimination bracket, I got matched up against Rapha. And again, anyone who is familiar with Quake, even just a tiny bit, knows who Rapha is.
Yes.
And I had to beat him. And I didn't. But I was very, very close to beating him.
Yeah. You almost beaten 2-0, right?
Yes. I was about less than 10 seconds away from winning against him when I just made the wrong decisions on where to go on the map as he was chasing me to make up the frag difference. And I couldn't escape from him. He caught me at the very end. He tied up the game. And then that basically just broke me in a way that I just couldn't stand up from it anymore. And he won that map. And then he won the following map very one-sidedly because by then I was just depleted. So unfortunately, I couldn't beat him, but I still did really well. And the main thing that I showed myself on the World Championships, and I proved that I can do really well. And from then on, I started doing really, really well in Quake. I was grinding it, playing against pros day in and day out. I got signed for Myztro Gaming, which is an org I'm still a part of to this day after 5-6 years, something like that. So many years now. Maybe even 7 by now. Whatever, point is, that's when things started to go really well for me. And finally, after all those years of trying and failing and almost succeeding but not succeeding, this was the turning point for me. And the very next event was in Denver that I played for Quake Champions, and I actually managed to win it. Where there were all these other pros.
We'll skip to that in a sec. I have one last question about the championship you mentioned now, because basically, if this was a movie or like an anime, RAISY, it's actually perfect to set up. Like, not only were you a fan of Quake, but like you sort of couldn't play when it was Quake 3 and Quake Live, so you're just seeing all these big names. But then, like you say, the first World Championship, the person who eliminates you is fucking Rapha, who people don't know was the man in Quake Live, and obviously has been amazing in Quake Champions. And like I say, in an anime or a movie, the reason this would be like Act 1 is because it has to be foreshadowing, like he's like the final boss of Quake, basically. So like it's kind of fitting you faced him early on when you're like a rookie, right? But if people don't know, just give me a taste, right? When you first play Rapha in a LAN match, what is it like? Because I've heard, here's the interesting thing, RAISY. Obviously, there's a lot, like when you said earlier, Tox or someone, if you pick someone like Kilson, the reason these players are amazing is sometimes obviously they can just play so insanely mechanically well, it's just impossible to win against them. That's what's incredible. They can blow you out the server. But everyone always says the thing about Rapha is, it is like he's like a chess master. They say it's like it's mentally it's so hard to beat him. What's it like to play him the first time? Was it intimidating? I mean, even that thing you said there about like I was this close to beating him, like everyone has that story, mate. That's why that saying exists. This is Rapha. He always has the lucky moment, or he gets away, or he does the brain play at the end. You know, give me some thoughts. What's it like to play this guy? Is it different?
It's really difficult to put into words. He has some kind of an aura, I would say. Not just necessarily his reputation or his calm demeanor or his results behind him and the way he just is so confident, you know, but also like you start the match and you just feel like you're playing against someone who never makes a mistake. And then you have to do better than him. How do you do that? And all of a sudden you just freeze and you don't know what to do. And you're doubting yourself. You're like second guessing. Like usually I'm very confident. I'll go this way. I'll do that. I expect this to happen. But then all of a sudden you're against Rapha. And you just feel like he knows that I'm going to do this. What do? I cannot do this then because he's going to expect it. It's not going to work. I have to do something else. But he's going to expect me to do that because he knows that I know that he knows. You know, like these kind of mind games, all of a sudden, within like a fraction of a second, it goes through your mind and then you just don't know what to do. And all of a sudden, he has full control and you're on the run. Good luck surviving, you know. So it's difficult. But that's what it felt like after a few years of playing against him. My first actual time playing against him, I was just way too motivated and determined to do really well.
Right.
So I didn't care that it was Rapha. So the very first time I played against him, I didn't feel like that. I didn't freeze up. I just did what I do, and it worked for the most part up until the very end when it didn't. But usually, I feel like he kind of like breaks you mentally if you let him, unless you just somehow manage to shake it off and not care that you're playing against him. If you just focus on it too much and try to overthink things, then he won already. But if you try to ignore the fact that you're playing against him, you're gonna do way better. But it's really hard to put into words. You actually have to go through these thoughts and feelings to fully experience and fully feel and know what I'm trying to say and explain here.
Yes. Obviously, in this story, Rapha will appear again. As I said, he's sort of like the final boss in this story. But if you go then, as you say, to this Dreamhack tournament that you won, the key thing is you won it. Like, I mean, if people don't know, even though if you look back now, some of the big names aren't all there. There are some big names there. The other players who were also the top players there also became the best players in Quake Champions, people like your teammates, etc. So to win this event, the funny thing people aren't going to realise is it must have had like a sort of almost like callbacks to when you were in Counter-Strike, because the joke is when you won this event and you were doing well online, actually everyone just kept saying you were online or all that, like, oh, because you worked from Quake Live, everyone was like, oh, Quake Champions is just broken, a bad game. And they were just, it's like every excuse went against you, I've noticed, when you broke out like this. Did you feel like you actually got respect for winning this event? Because everyone at the time was like, he just plays like fucking clutch is broken, the LG is broken, the game's at random. You know what everyone was like back then? There was like everything about it that wasn't like Quake Live meant the game sucked. So I feel like you winning to some people made like, oh, the game just isn't good, whereas actually you were looking great in this game. What did you think of this?
I think this is where I kind of had an advantage, some kind of an advantage compared to the old school Quake players, because they have been playing the same exact thing for many, many years, and that was the core of everything that they've done. And for me, I started with Quake Champions, like competing wise. I started with Quake Champions, and I came from Counter-Strike, so I had to adapt to Quake Champions first, relearn all the things, all the mechanics, get familiar with it again from my history with Quake Live and Quake 3. So I just had to adapt and accept that it's a new game and it's gonna be different. And because I managed to adapt fast, and I was like more open-minded, I didn't care about how much different it is from previous Quakes. All I cared about that it is like this. It works like that. I have to do this, and then I might win. instead of just focusing on, oh, this is not what it used to be like, this is bullshit, this doesn't work, this should be changed, this is wrong. So compared to old schoolers, I feel like I had kind of an advantage with my mindset when it came to adapting to Quake Champions. And at the beginning, especially the first 2 to 3 years, Quake Champions went through a lot of changes.
Yes.
When it comes to balance. They introduced new characters.
Even the scoring system changed, the length of the duels, everything, right?
Yes, and you also had to get used to how abilities work, and the fact that there are abilities and that you can use them very efficiently, because it wasn't just something that was like a supporting thing to the core of the game. It was like kind of a big thing that could get you frags on its own, like using abilities, and you could get that and take that to your advantage. If you did it right, it was very fruitful. And so I just tried my best to figure out what is comfortable for me, which characters I'm very good with, how to best use their abilities to be most efficient with them. I was also the type of player that played very carefully. I was reckless, like I played fast and I was very aggressive, but at the same time, before I went into those moves, those aggressive moves, I tried to calculate the risk and weigh like whether it's like worth taking the step or not. I actually have this mentality from CS. It's kind of funny, actually. It might be interesting for you to think about when I explain it. Basically, my mindset was always better safe than sorry. And what I mean by that is when you play CS, you have to check every corner, right? Especially because it's a team game. You don't want to let your teammates down. Sure. If you don't check that corner, and because of that, you get killed, or your teammate gets killed, or you lose the round, you let your team down. So you must check every corner. You must expect every outcome. You must expect that the team might do like a pop flash and peek you, so you have to be ready for it. Anything and everything you have to think about, calculate, and expect. And basically that was my better safe than sorry. I better do this just in case. I better think about this, better check this corner, better expect that just in case.
Right.
And that was my mentality going into Quake Champions as well. And that's why it was really hard, I feel like, and many pros actually have talked about this with me or with others, that it was really hard to get a grip against me and figure me out, lure me into traps, stuff like that, because I was always ready in their eyes. I was, of course, not always ready, but I tried to always think about, okay, so if I was my enemy against myself right now, what would I do? How would I set up a trap? How would I try to overtake control, stuff like that? And because I was thinking about what they would do against me, if they actually did that, I was ready for it. And if they didn't, I feel like they didn't do something that could work. Like either they did what I was expecting them to do, and then because I expected it, it didn't work, or they didn't do it, so they didn't even try. But that what it feel like.
Okay.
And so many times, I was ready when they set up a trap, and it just didn't work. And then they just felt like as if there's no way to make me out of balance, like to get the control back, or to get the frag on me, or make something that I wouldn't expect. And I'm not trying to say that I was untouchable, because I surely wasn't, but I feel like I was almost always ready,
Yes. One thing I did want to ask you actually about, I'll segue into this question, is one of the things I also did notice compared to, like you say, the legends of the past Quakes, is some of them actually early on, especially in Quake Champions, you could just tell that they had a mindset of like old Quake. Like if one champion was broken, they thought, this is just my champion, they was playing that only. One thing I noticed about you is you were always very adaptive. Even though people might have said you just played the broken champions early, actually one of your best skills probably is adapting between the different champions that are strong and the weapons that are strong. And I'm actually surprised that you say you sort of like calculate, because I would have guessed that you'd play a bit more feel. You seem quite intuitive in the game, like you kind of just know what to do. Is some of it conscious? Is some of it just you going off feel? What would you say about the adaptive element? Because it does seem like if put it this way, as much as people might go, he's come second many times, I'd say there's a reason why other people haven't been in all those finals, and that's because they have to ride the meta. When their champion's strong, when they're going strong, they can be at the top. You'll be at the top all the time, so you must be good at adapting.
Yes. Many people told me that I'm a natural at it. Sorry, it was difficult to say. But I also feel like my decision making was really good, really fast, and usually the right choices I made. And with the, I feel like with the character balances, the champion balances, yeah, I adapted to many things, but I also feel like I came up with a lot of metas. I figured
Right.
things out, and because of those things, because of how I changed how the game is being played on a pro level, many times the game was balanced. I feel like because of me, because of the way I
Right.
played.
Okay.
For example, one of the iconic things is as Galena, you can put down totems on the map to certain places. Um, and if you go up to that totem, it has an aura, and if you go into it, it heals you. Um, and I went on an empty server and I just started throwing it at all the places, and I tried to come up with places where they wouldn't be found. And eventually I found broken places where you could like throw it out of the map, but in a
Okay.
way that it still can reach you, but the enemy would never think of checking it and stuff like that. So like that was one of the metas that I kind of broke with this idea of how to place those totems. And at the time, no one really played Galena. It wasn't one of the best characters. They were just always better options, safer picks and stuff like that. But I played her, and I played her in a way that kind of broke the game. And they actually had to come up with a rule in the Quake Pro League before they fixed the game so that you couldn't place those totems anymore to those places, because nowadays you can't anymore. They get destroyed when you put them out of bounds. But back then you still could do it. But because it was like throughout the Quake Pro League weeks, where weekly we had to play against each other, they had to come up with a quick rule because the game wasn't fixed yet to not be allowed to put totems out of bounds, and that was all because of me. It was funny. Some people complained about it, but I feel like I didn't really necessarily do anything. It was kind of an exploit, I would say, but at the same time, I felt like I played fairly. It was a part of the game.
Yeah.
Anyone could do it if you put
Yeah.
the time in and look around, and you actually come up with the idea. You put the effort in to figure it out and test it out, and you are brave enough to even try it out during a professional level match where there's prize on the line. Then I feel like it was fair enough. I wouldn't necessarily say that it was like that I'm proud that I played that way, because it was kind of still an exploit, like the Fnatic boost and overpass
Sure.
from CS,
Yes.
and they had to forfeit. So I mean, but still, it was something I came up with, and I'm proud of the fact that I could change the meta, and that the developers actually had to come up with something to fix it.
Sure.
It's just funny. But yeah, there were certain metas that were because of me, and they changed the game, the balance, the way characters work, or their abilities work, because I used them so efficiently that it almost felt unfair to play against. Like you said, the clutch, for example, one of the most iconic characters for me. They completely changed clutch, even though at the time no one really played it. There was only one person who played clutch and was very efficient with it, and that person was the Hang. But apart from him, no one played him. Everyone just thought that it's way too big of a character, it's clunky, it's hard to navigate around with, it's just not worth playing. But then I started playing him in a particular way, where I just wouldn't show up until my ability was ready. And when my ability was ready, I went full throttle, and then I just
Right.
overwhelmed my opponent. And then as soon as I killed him and my ability was used up, I just was nowhere to be found on the map again until my ability was ready again.
Right.
So it was like a cheeky way of playing him, but it was really hard to do because you had to give up full control. You had to know your limitations, when to allow yourself to go in aggressive. You had to, again, better safe than sorry mindset comes here.
That's why it fit your style, right? It's a perfect champion
Yes,
for you, basically.
perfectly fitting my style. Yeah. So I started playing him like that, and I started winning very many online tournaments, and I was also using him very efficiently on LAN events as well. So it wasn't just like a ping related thing. It was like something you could do on LAN as well, where it's the hardest to play really well. But eventually they nerfed him very many times at first, and then they completely revamped his ability. And I think it's because of me.
Sure.
And that's funny.
Although, well, we'll just say, shout out, you did win on him at this most recent QuakeCon. Even though the result wasn't the greatest, you did get the win on Clutch, though. So at least that's something.
Yeah, that was the only map I won against Rapha, where I was Clutch, and I actually won it very one-sidedly. And yeah, I felt like, yay, Clutch, you made me proud once more.
Sure.
My little Clutch robot.
Sure.
But ultimately I still lost that grand final.
By the way, to rewind, obviously with all the finals you've played in, Dreamhack Denver's not like even close to the biggest event of your career, etc. But I always think a thing that a fan might misunderstand is just to go to a LAN that has players like Toxic, Kilson, Rapha, like big names who are champions, and then to win the LAN, you get to stand on the stage and lift this is a big deal, right? That there's a meaningful moment to do that, even if that's not a Quake World Championship. It means something to have that win, right?
Yes, of course, it was incredible. That was my first ever LAN victory in Quake Champions, and it was one of the biggest events at the time, of course, right after the World Championships. Yes. And like you said, very many of the pros were there, and I just somehow was the one to win it, and it just felt incredible. The only other time that was similar to this was when I played the Italian event in Lucca, where I came from the lower bracket and I had to make a huge comeback, and I had to beat Kilsen, had to beat Claus, had to beat Cooler, had to beat Hron, I think.
These are all the absolute best players at the time, by the way. Yeah, so yeah,
yes,
exactly.
And then I was all of a sudden in grand final in a double best of 3 against Rapha, out of all people, and I had to beat him twice nonetheless because I come from the lower bracket, and I managed to do it, and it just felt all so surreal. I mean, if you watch back the event, the cast and everything, like right after the match, they were like showing us on camera in person, all that, and you wouldn't think that I won because I looked so emotionless, but inside I was like, what just happened? Did I win? Is it really over? Is there another map? Did I miscount something? It just felt so surreal. But yeah, like those 2 events were just incredible to experience. And
by the way, that venue for the Italian one was dope, where essentially because they made it in this church, it was like a fucking Quake map. It could have been like Tony 2 from Quake 3. What a fucking sick venue that was. I bet that added to the atmosphere, right? But it was cool.
It was very one of a kind, really.
Yes. And as you say, obviously the key thing there was to beat Rapha. That's a bit. By the way, I don't care what anyone says about, maybe in this period he wasn't as good. Anytime you beat a name like that, it really fucking means something. Like these. There's a reason. Like you said, Rapha might not have won every tournament, but he's had very few bad games. Like his flaw of his game is fucking amazing. So to win, like you say, in this scenario, the format implies he should win because the fact in the final you have to do a bracket reset. So it's a big deal to win that one. Also, I noticed you did shade in, if people have been following the story, RAISY hates single elim tournaments. You're not a fan, right? I mean, to be fair, you've had those bullshit ones where you had to drink like all the way to QuakeCon, lost like a BO1, then had to fly home. That must suck. So I get why you like the double elim.
Yeah, I prefer when the result is more skill-based and less random. Right. So if it's a single elimination, anything can happen. You can have one bad game or whatever, or you just play against the one person you want to avoid in the tournament or something like that. And yeah, fair enough. Eventually you might have to play against him anyway. But if it's so early on and you get knocked out so early, just because it was the one person you wanted to avoid up until the end, then that sucks,
Yes.
So if it is a best of 3, at least you get a second chance. You can still, after losing, you can still, gather yourself together and just try again and give it your all. And usually, I have a history of going through the lower bracket, like having to go through the lower bracket.
Yes.
And it sucks. but at least I have a second chance. It's very exhausting, very, very depleting to go through the lower bracket. You have to play more matches and you have to constantly play them because you have to catch up to the upper bracket. And even if you make it through to the grand final, you are still, what's the word? Not handicapped, but like your opponent has the upper hand.
Yes, he has an advantage.
An advantage, that's the word. He's still gonna have a map advantage or a set advantage, and also on top of that he gets to start the picks and bans with the veto maps and characters and all that. So in all kinds of ways he's gonna have the upper hand on you. You are tired, depleted, you barely made it here. He has the map advantage or set advantage, he has the picks and bans advantage. And then you're like you don't have much more in you, and you're just gonna start a grand final like a best of 7, and good luck. You're just thrown in there basically. And I had to go through that so many times. At this point, I can't even count anymore. I think I looked it up a while ago. I think there were 10 QPL finals, Quake Pro League finals, and I believe I might be wrong, but I think I was 7 times in the grand final.
I think that's right, yeah. I think that's right.
And neither of the times I could win, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
But I was in the grand final from the lower bracket, I think always. 7 times out of 10. And that's just heartbreaking because it comes back to, again, yes, I have a Quake career. Yes, I'm playing in the pro scene, but it again feels like as if I'm back, that young kid trying to accomplish something in CS, and I'm just like so close, but just not close enough to make it happen,
Right, look, this is obviously a topic we were going to have to address at some point in time, but we'll do it here. What we'll do is we'll just move around as we go in the interview. So on this topic of the idea that you've had all these finals, but unfortunately you've lost many of them, you've got 2 qualities to this I want to ask you about, because actually, as the esports historian, they've followed many other games. Obviously, in other games, sometimes this happens. You have a team or a player that famously just comes second a lot of the times, and you actually have the worst version of it, RAISY, because here's the difference. Counter-Strike. In Counter-Strike, if a team like the most famous one was Astralis, obviously, right? When they were number 1, RAISY, it was actually okay that my friends, the Americans in Team Liquid, used to come second because it was always to that team, and everyone agrees that's the best team ever. So look, it still sucks to lose, but at least in your brain you can go, yeah, but they were like winning everything. It was only them I lost to, basically. And also, they might just be the best to ever play. Your problem is, aside from Rapha, it's also a lot of different people in these finals. And if anyone goes and looks, you have the other nightmare one, which must be the nightmare fuel, which is if anyone goes and looks, you have the one where if someone beats you in one final, you play them in the next tournament earlier in the bracket, beat them. So it's like, oh, well, I've got them, I've got the revenge. But then someone else beats you in the final, which is also going to suck because to bring it all back, if you're a casual fan, the problem is this: to make a final, if you're like the 6th best player, is amazing. It wouldn't even be the end of the world to make a final and lose. But if you can make this many finals and you know you have beaten these players, you're going to eventually think, it's just me. It must just be me that's doing something wrong. It can't be that, it's not that everyone else is better than me. I've even beaten them. It's not that it's one guy and he's just unbeatable. I've even beaten Rapha. I've even beaten Kills. I've beaten all these people. Is that something that you would say you agree with? Does it sort of... It kind of makes you have to think I'm doing something wrong, right? It can't just be that they're better than me on the day every time, right?
I don't know. Honestly, every time I played, I of course wanted to win, and I tried my very best at the time to get the most out of it. And it just felt like every time someone was just popping off, they have their best game of their life. They are just not missing the railgun shots. They are just when we are fighting for an item, either they survive with 10 health and they kill me, and then the item spawns, they pick it up, and then they are still alive, in control and healthy, or they just hey Garpy, sorry, I'm living at his place. I felt like if anything that could decide the smallest of difference that would turn it in their favor, that thing would always be in their favor. I felt like I might be wrong, but I'm probably wrong, but it just felt like that as someone who was always losing it
does
in
that
the final.
actually become something that gets in your head as well? Like, do you yourself, when that happens, if you get an unlucky moment, does it sort of feel like, oh, fuck this again? Or is it, do you feel unlucky essentially?
Probably in the back of my head, it is there. It's lingering after so many occasions now. It might be like a mental block at this point, but at the beginning, when the first like 1 or 2 times it happened, I was just like, unfortunate.
Yeah,
oh,
sure.
they got lucky. Oh, whatever. But at this point, yeah, I feel like it's been too many times being second. But yeah, I mean, like you said, it wasn't just always Rapha. When he won against me, and then I played him the next time and I won against him, then it was someone else stepping up.
Yes.
I remember it was Cooler at Luca, and then there was Kielsen in 2021 or 2.
22.
Can't
Yeah,
remember.
when it was back online
But,
again. Yeah.
Yeah, 22. Yeah. And then throughout the lockdowns, the online part. It was Wenger, who is my teammate, my friend,
Yes.
and rival as well. But so like there was always someone else, like no matter who I beat and who I lost against prior, and then I beat them, there was always someone else stepping up, and I don't feel like I allowed them on purpose to win against me or anything like that. Or that I became like too comfortable after, let's say, like I lost to Rafa in one tournament, and then the next tournament I play against him earlier and I beat him and he's knocked out, and then of course I feel happy and relieved,
Sure.
and I feel like hopeful that okay, maybe this is now my
Yes.
chance, but I don't feel like I let go and I
Right.
became like too like half-assed with the remaining of the tournament, so then they have the upper hand against me. I feel like I was still on 100%, but it was just not the right play or not enough, or someone else was seriously popping off or something like that, and I just couldn't answer it. But yeah, even on like smaller tournaments, like 2 years ago in Barcelona when I played KeenCon, there was no Rafa there, but I still didn't win the tournament. I lost to Maxter in that occasion. What else was there? I can't remember. But yeah, like there was always someone, and it's at this point it's kind of like a running joke, so to say, that RAISY always second. It feels bad, and I don't like it at all.
Sure.
But unfortunately, it has been true for a while. And
on that last part you say there, let me ask you this question. So there's one thing also that I want to tell. If someone out there is just a Quake player in the community or a fan, here's unfortunately the worst thing you can say to RAISY is when he comes second like that, even though I know you have good intentions, when you tell him like, oh, don't worry though, it was a great tournament anyway and you did awesome, like when you come second this many times, you don't want to fucking hear that, I can tell you right now. Like, and even though it's true, look, it is still awesome to come top 2 and to get prize, but the problem is, like, essentially what I was getting to earlier as well, RAISY, is if someone really is just second best, it's okay to lose. When in this scenario, you know you can beat these players. You know, like if the right things happen, you could be the champion, right? That must be the worst part of it.
Yeah, and honestly, I might sound, what's the word? Maybe not the right word to use is arrogant, but like to me, second place feels like as if I'm the worst player ever, and it's like the last placement and whatever, and it's just every time I have such a hard time swallowing it and accepting it. And for many days after that, I have like maybe even nightmares about losing, and then just it's just the fact that you can't change it anymore.
Yes.
Like the event is over, you can't go back, you cannot fix the mistake that made you become second. You can't go back, you can't overwrite it. It's over, it's done, it's dusted. You have to accept your second, that's it. And yeah, like you said, for most people, second is like, oh wow, that's so great, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But for me, it always felt like a failure, you know, like I was just disappointed. I let myself down. I just felt embarrassed, really, every single time. I couldn't even look at in the eye of people. Like when the match was over and I had to accept my trophy or medal or whatever, and I had to smile into the camera. I couldn't get myself to do it, no matter how hard I tried. And I looked sad even though I was second, because I felt like as if it was the end of the world for me, you know.
Yes.
I can't explain it any better. And I know it might sound stupid because it's still second place, but it felt like as if I was the worst of the worst, you know.
When I actually was looking up some of your interviews from this time period when you're having these big finals, these cut seconds, etc., one thing that I like you're saying would probably surprise people is people might just think, oh, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you're someone where your results are frivolous. Like if you win, you win. Who cares if I don't? Whatever. Maybe that's it. You just deny it. You're in denial. You forget about it. I actually got the sense from all these interviews, especially as you say, in the first couple, you could say that like, they had a great day. You know, once it's happened enough times with different people, like you say, you would describe it that way. It's sort of true. It's sort of like nightmare fuel. Like I can tell you think about this, or when you're then thinking about the next time, it's something that's in the back of your head, or people are going to tell you still haven't won one yet. Like you're clearly not someone who just dismisses it. Like this is really important to you, right?
Yeah, and like you said, like the nightmare fuel part is like to this day, I sometimes think about that first Quake Champions World Championships. That's hard to say. Where I lost against Rapha, and I just needed to do well for 10 more seconds, and I still think back to that time, and I wish that I could go back and just fix it, you know, to this day still, and that was in 2017. So
because I'm guessing the feeling is if you change the first one in sort of the chain of results,
exactly.
Everything could be different, right? Because that is kind of true, right? Back. You know the term we have in English, it's called self-fulfilling prophecy. It's the idea that if you think there really is like luck or bad luck or whatever, it'll also then continue to happen because your brain sort of like gets ready for it in a way. Like you just think, this is what happens to me, right? If you'd have just randomly won that first one or even just any of the close ones, if you just win one, it maybe changes your whole mentality.
It does feel like that, yeah. I sometimes I just really want to go back, fix that one event, and then get a second chance with all the others. Yeah. And I just wish that I could do better, and somehow, you know, all those second places I could turn into first places. But it is what it is.
This might be a mean question, but obviously you'll know. Is it the case, do you think also, that after a certain point in time, do you think the opponent also gets the sense of like, oh shit, I'm playing RAISY in a final. Like basically, if I put him in a bad situation, or if I ever go, maybe he'll lose, maybe he'll have a bad game. Do you think that do you think it gives them a bit of confidence? Am I going too far with that? What do you think?
Honestly, I never really thought about what my opponent would think when he plays against me. Like, I never think about it, but I assume similarly to how I experience playing against any other pro, and I have like a thought process even before the match, like, oh, I'm playing against this guy, and this guy likes these characters and these maps, and when he's playing this character on that map, he's gonna approach it like this, because that's what he usually does, that's what he's good at, so what am I gonna do to counter it and get the upper hand? So I assume the other pros are like this with me as well. I just never really thought about it. I wouldn't even know how to approach myself if I ever had to play against myself. That would be interesting though. I wish that was possible.
Sure, it'd be cool if it was actually a real training system, where there's like an AI bot that plays like you. Yeah, sure. That would be the way, right? Because by the way, what you're saying is like as an aside, I actually used to work in SK when Rapha used to play there a long time ago, and I've had many conversations about Quake in private, and I can tell you, he does think exactly that way, but not even just tactically, mate. He will even think in terms of like how a match might play out. So if he's playing certain people who maybe he does think he can put under pressure, for example, that might actually be his game plan, not just like play the map this way. It'll be sort of like, I know if I can, like you say, basically if I break this guy on map one, then like after that he won't be as confident on his map. He would actually plan the game that way, as far as I know. It's kind of like part of his tactics, as it were.
Yeah, very many of us think like that, I believe, because I think this is just part of the game. Like, not many people would think about it, because for most people the game starts when the map starts.
Exactly.
But in reality, it starts way before that. You just have to think about all the outside of game aspects as well when you go into a match against whoever. And you just have to basically come up with a plan on how to even approach this whole match, you know, and figure out what to expect, how to counter it, what you want to do, what he might likely do, and all that. And just like basically go through this scenario in your head before the match even begins.
By the way, one last question I have about the Dreamhack Denver, and then let's get into a lot of the World Championships. It's just this, because as you said, it ties into what you said about the fact that sometimes it does look like the developers just were like watching your games like, enough of that shit, it's too good. Because after this fucking final, it's like the joke is, it almost looks like they were just watching this final and they were like, get rid of this Anarki champion, this is way overpowered. Because like, you looked fucking sick on it, you were broken at the time, but after that, it looks like they just nerfed that into the ground. What do you think?
It does felt like that. Like very many characters that I played efficiently got nerfed, and I feel like I must have played a part in that decision. It was the same with Anarki, and then I was a sword leg main for a long time, and no one else was playing sword leg as efficiently or as comfortably. But actually, funny thing, sorry, but like I just remembered something regarding Anarki and sword leg. So their movement style is they have air acceleration. They can turn in the air while they are moving without losing speed. And that movement set I learned from CS when I was playing on bunny hop and surf maps.
Okay.
And those game modes I played a lot and I loved them. And to this day I still do those. And because of me putting so many hours into bunny hop and KZ and surf in CS, when I started playing those characters in Quake, I immediately became familiar and comfortable with their movement style. And I was playing them very, very efficiently to the point where people just couldn't handle it. And I feel like partially because of that, the characters were nerfed or changed or balanced and stuff like that. And I feel like I had a huge part in it. I'd like to believe. Of course, I can't confirm, but every champion that I played in a meta got nerfed eventually. First it was Anarki, then it was sword leg, and then everyone else was already playing Nyx comfortably. When by the time I even started playing her first, because it was just not a character I played before. There was always something else like Anarki and sword leg that I preferred. But after they got nerfed and I had to adapt again, I had to start playing Nyx, which at the time was one of the best characters. And I actually became a really strong Nyx. And then eventually she also got nerfed with how the Ghost Walk, her ability worked. Like you coming out of it, you were able to immediately shoot. And I used this to my advantage because many people.
It was probably the most powerful ability in the game if you used it right at the time, right? It was like almost a guaranteed kill if you did it right, yeah?
Kind of like alongside Ranger's Dire Orb,
yes,
because that was like an insta telefrag basically. But yeah, if the way I used Nyx was kind of different to how people used it at the time, because most people used it as a get out of jail free card when they either fucked up or did a risky decision that didn't pay off, and so they could escape using the ability. But the way I used it is once I knew and I read what my opponent is gonna do, I used it aggressively to start the fight with. Instead of running away from the fight, I used it to initiate the fight and have like an ambush kind of play style. And because you could come out of the invis and immediately shoot, very many times by the time your opponent reacted to what just happened, you already dealt like over 100 damage, you know? And so eventually that got changed as well. And I feel like I had something to do with that as well. And then there was the Galena Totem meta that I explained earlier. I told you about Clutch and that event when I had to do the double bracket reset comeback
Italian
against
Open,
Rapha. Yeah, that one. It was the event where I played Keel, and I was one of the best Keel players at the time. And then after that, Keel got nerfed as well, and no one even picked him for years, stuff like that. So I would like to say that I played a huge part in the meta changes and the balancings. But of course, it wasn't just all me. But I feel like they definitely considered toning it down because of the way I use the characters and abilities.
When earlier on you were actually like breaking down how you contrasted Counter-Strike and Quake and like the skills in it, and as you said, you're not like obviously biased in the way other people would be, because you actually tried playing both, and you played both quite a lot now, obviously, and have tried to be in somewhat pro in both games. A thing that I also think might surprise people if they've never seen an interview with you is because, like I say, you weren't from the old Quakes, so when you came into Quake Champions, you were good. People were sort of hating on you, and they tried to make it like, oh, it's just the only. In fact, they even used to literally say that on all the forums. That if you went back to like an ES reality thread, if you won the online cop, it would be like in Quake Live, you know, whatever, Cypher would have wrecked this guy. Like that was like every fucking comment, and no one gave you credit. Well, the joke is they might think that just means you just love this one game, Quake Champions. You were only good at this. Like the joke is, I went back and looked at some old interviews from like 2018, and you yourself complain about the game and say that like the champions are all still unbalanced. I've even got the quote here: the weapons are still unbalanced, the game is still random, and it is much less skill based than previous Quake. So I think the thing that might shock people, Razy, is you actually seem to have like a very sort of reflective, quite sort of even-keeled approach to the game. You're not just somebody who's just like, oh, I'm good at this, right? Yeah, this is all brilliant. Everything here is the best. Like, you seem like you have a pretty reasonable mind if you think something, even if you use it, it's broken. If it is broken, you can acknowledge it, right?
Yes. Actually, on that note, sometimes, unfortunately, I am a little bit dumb when it comes to these things.
You shouldn't have said it like that, maybe.
You'll see why.
Okay.
For example, with the Galena Totem meta, I actually streamed it, so it was out in the public. I could have saved it up. I could have hidden it. But because I have such a passion for the game, and I want it to be as good as it can be, and I want it to be balanced, I never liked the fact that certain characters or champions' abilities were like too OP. I always disliked it. I wanted the game to be as skillful as possible, and not be about just pressing the ability button and you win, you know. And like you said in my previous interviews, I've always talked about this because I wanted the core of the game to be the main focus, and the abilities to be like a little bonus thing, but not be like a make or break deal where if you are bad at the core of the game, you can still win just because you have abilities.
Yes.
You know, I never wanted it to be like that. And yes, people are right. If we were playing Quake Live, I would lose to Cypher, I would lose to rapha, I would lose to Kilston, I would lose to all of those people because they played that game competitively on a professional level for like a decade. I never did. And I don't think I would be as good as they are, even though I have been a pro in Quake Champions for many years. It's just a different game. It's like comparing CS 1.6 to CS Source or something like that. They are very similar, and many aspects are the same, but they're different. And it just because you're good in one of them, it doesn't mean you're going to be good at the other.
Sure.
And yeah, so the reason I'm dumb is because with the Galena meta, I could have hit it, but because I'm so passionate, I wanted the world to see that it's broken, that it needs fixing. And instead of me saving it up for like a LAN event where I could have used it and I could have gotten the upper hand and won something out of it, instead I just gave it away, and then it got fixed before I could take advantage of it, you know? So in that regard, I was dumb. But at the same time, I feel like I did the right move. Like, I'm proud that I gave feedback, you know, because I wanted the game to be as good as it can be.
I've had to make a lot of tough choices in my career, but thanks to the support of my Patreon community, the Skrilluminati, I never have to make tough financial decisions. So this video and all the rest on my channel are kindly supported by Ahmed Haju, Frisky, Mac Pugnaccio Racula, Animosity, Jensen Gore, Tobias Bernasconi, Tosh, Toucan, and you know it if you've ever heard before, and you'll hear it many times in the future. A special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerry Keys Minion. Do you want to ask a question in my video AMA? Do you want to be part of one of those long discussions where we talk about whatever you like in esports? Do you want teasers, find out who the upcoming guests are going to be? Or maybe you want to suggest a topic for a future Thorin's Thoughts type video? Well, if any of these perks or others appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is today and join the Skrilluminati by joining the Patreon link in the description box below.